The story begins by showing a man who is on the verge of death. His face looks confused, as if he doesn't understand what is happening. He sees his body impaled by iron traps, and her blood flowing relentlessly. It's only then that he remembers he's now in a dungeon. He looks up, seeing his friends shouting at him from above.
Dayumn, are you okay?
But his friends leave him to die, without hesitation, just walking away. With his remaining strength, Dayumn tries to rise. He pulls the iron spikes out of his body, one by one, but it's already too late. Slowly, blood continues to flow, and his consciousness begins to fade. In his almost unconscious state, Dayumn wonders if the situation is even real. Dayumn is someone who was forced into another world, a world he doesn't recognize. This all happened exactly 1 month ago. Dayumn was walking in the city center, like any other day, talking on the phone. Suddenly, a blue light appeared, and without warning, Dayumn was teleported to a place he had never seen. And it turns out, Dayumn wasn't alone. There were many people gathered there. It seemed they were also teleported by that blue light. Everyone was confused, not knowing what had just happened. Dayumn, still in a daze, tried to observe his surroundings, trying to understand what was going on. Suddenly, a rabbit appeared, introducing itself as the guide. The rabbit seemed overly cheerful, full of energy. But then, a man in a black suit approached it. "Stop playing around, you rabbit. Send me back. I was in a job interview." The man yelled angrily. They argued, and the man could no longer hold his emotions back. Then, something shocking happened. The rabbit swiftly attacked the man's neck. And in an instant, the man was dead. Everyone was silent, unable to speak, just staring in horror. The rabbit smiled and said to everyone, "If you break the rules of this game, you'll die. Hey, there may be 100 of you. Let's start the game." The rabbit added enthusiastically. Dayumn was still in shock from what had just happened, staring at the lifeless body of the man. His whole body trembled. The rabbit provided basic equipment to all the participants. Dayumn only received a small knife that seemed useless. Meanwhile, the others got better gear weaponry that could be used for combat. The rabbit then flew up and said, "Now, your endurance test begins."
The dungeon game is started.
Suddenly, a horde of large monsters appeared, charging at the players. The area was filled with deadly traps. Every minute someone would die. If the players made any mistake, no matter how small, death would come for them. Sometimes, players had to kill each other to survive. This was a game where strength was everything. Dayumn, armed only with a small knife, he couldn't fight. He was just a hindrance to the others. At the start of the game, everyone received basic equipment and skill cards. Most of the other players had useful skills to survive, but Dayumn received a useless skill he didn't even know how to use. Dayumn continued to be seen as a loser and bullied by the other players. But then, a man about Dayunn's age appeared, and his name was Ha-Sung-woo. Ha-Sung-woo stepped in to help Dayumn, who was being bullied by several people. Kindly, Ha-Sung-woo helped Dayumn and told him to rest, because tomorrow, we need to move from here. Long story short, morning came, but suddenly a group of men screamed and were chased by a giant rolling rock. Then, the Sung-woo group arrived, but suddenly, there was an explosion. It turned out, one of their team members stepped on a trap landmine and fell instantly. Reluctantly, Sung-woo and the others had to keep running to survive. Run faster if you want to stay alive. If you run out of stamina here, you'll die, Sung-woo shouted firmly. Dayumn could no longer keep up. His stamina nearly gone. He lost focus and fell into a trap hole. Sung-woo, seeing this, shouted and tried to help him. But, with an expression of frustration, they had no choice to leave Dayumn behind. It is because the boulder would kill them all if they didn't leave immediately. The rabbit looked satisfied, because he had succeeded in ruining their cooperation. With a face full of resentment, Sung-woo reluctantly left Dayumn. Dayumn wakes up weak and disoriented at the bottom of a dungeon, her vision blurred and whispers haunting her mind. Slowly, Dayumn started to lose her consciousness. Meanwhile, Sung-woo's group defeats a colossal stone giant after a fierce battle. Celebrating their unexpected victory, the cheerful rabbit guide appears, clapping enthusiastically. "Congratulations on defeating the final boss," he exclaims. Sung-woo steps forward, exhaustion evident on his face. "Is it over? Can we go home now?" he asks. Guide grins mischievously and replies, "Go home? What are you talking about? This is just the beginning. Let's move on to the next stage." Everyone is shocked and refuses to accept this harsh reality. Guide continues, "The real game starts now. What you experienced before was just the player selection process." Anxiety and despair wash over the survivors as they process what Guide just said. The remaining players, drained of energy, feel hopeless. They're thirsty, hungry, exhausted, and covered in wounds. Suddenly, Guide returns with a reward for those who survived the first stage. He casts a healing spell, restoring everyone's wounds, energy, and even enhancing their physical abilities. To everyone's astonishment, Sungwoo's previously injured hand is miraculously healed, growing back as if it had never been damaged. The scene shifts back to Dawon, who also feels the effects of the healing spell. His injuries vanish, and he regains his strength. He was still confused about what happened, but Dawon is now faced with a new problem. How can he get out of this deep hole? Suddenly, a glowing message appears before his eyes. Dungeon is resetting. With his little brain, he's still confused about what just happened. He asked why I was still alive. The dungeon begins to restructure itself. Dawon's blood spilled across the floor, floats into the air, and disappears, while the trapdoors start to seal shut. Confused, Dawon tries to understand what's happening. He deciding to test his traps. He picks up a rock and throws it at one of the closed trapdoors. To his shock, the trap instantly activates, sending iron spikes shooting out near him. The guide rabbit suddenly appears. He is confused because Dawon is still alive even though the trap is active. Dawon asked the guide rabbit to take him back to his group. The guide replied, "I can't do that. The dungeon already considers you dead. You are no longer a player in this game." Guide smirks and adds, "Dawon, you might as well die now. Since you're not part of the game anymore, I can't help you." With that, Guide disappeared, leaving Dawon alone in despair. Before leaving, Guide mockingly says, "Stay there, Dawon, starve to death if you want. Even if you manage to escape, there's only more suffering waiting for you on the up above." Dawon recalled memories of the oppression and persecution he experienced. Determined, he opens his inventory and declares, "Don't underestimate me, you stupid rabbit. I'm a craftsman." With renewed resolve, Dawon vows to survive no matter what it takes. After eating some supplies from his inventory, Dawon felt a strange sense of peace in a hole. He had been there for over a month. He thought to himself that this hole was far more peaceful than life outside. But deep down, he knew he couldn't stay here forever. He reflected deeply, trying to figure out a way to escape this situation. Then, an idea struck him: dig upward and create a new way out. For now, that was the only plan that made sense, even if it sounded reckless and strange. With determination, Dawon began digging his way out. At first, he felt excited and motivated, even willing to endure pain in his hands to dig faster. But soon, he was confused about where to put the dirt he dug. Suddenly, an idea came to mind. Dawon decided to store the excess dirt in his inventory. Day and night, he continued digging. He thought this was far better than surviving outside. Suddenly, a notification appeared. A new skill had been unlocked. Intrigued, Dawon quickly opened the notification. He felt a surge of energy within him, as if his physical strength had significantly increased, and he could now break through anything. He had acquired the skill Earth Lumping, which allowed him to dig faster and more efficiently. The higher the level of Earth Lumping, the more dirt he could move, and the quicker he could dig. Dawon felt slightly disappointed and envious of other players. He had wished for a combat skill, but instead received one for digging. After taking a short break, Dawon thought of Sungwoo and wondered how his friends were doing. Once he had rested enough, Dawon decided to test out his new skill. To his surprise, he muttered, "What kind of useless skill is this?" Suddenly, the guide rabbit appeared, checking in on a Dawon condition. The rabbit entered the hole Dawon had been digging. As the rabbit descended deeper, it was shocked to see how far Dawon had dug underground. The guide rabbit assumed Dawon had run out of stamina and would surely perish down there. But what it saw was beyond its expectations, a glowing torch, and Dayumn casually strolling around with roasted meat in hand. Dayumn greeted the guide rabbit, who stood stunned at the sight before him. The rabbit was utterly confused. How had Dayumn survived this long, and even managed to furnish the whole with a bed and table? This looks like a proper home, thought the rabbit, stunned and unable to say a word. As we know, Dayumn is a skilled craftsman. With just a handful of soil and a bottle of water, he could transform them into useful tools. This time, he successfully crafted a clay plate. The rabbit curiously watched Dayumn. It turned out Dayumn wanted to welcome the rabbit as a guest. Since it had been so long since he had talked to someone, Dayumn began sharing how he had just acquired the ability to dig through the earth. Hearing this, the guide rabbit burst out laughing. After mocking Dayumn, the rabbit prepared to leave, urging him to give up. The rabbit revealed that while Dayumn was stuck here, other participants had already cleared level 1. This meant the dungeon would soon reset. All of Dayunn's hard work, his tunnels and creations would return to dirt. Dayumn had completely forgotten about the dungeon reset, which meant the cave he had dug would be sealed. He would have to return to where he started. The rabbit laughed at Dayunn's growing despair. Unfortunately, Dayumn had run out of stamina and couldn't return to his starting point. He was too weak to stand, thinking this was the end of his life. Suddenly, the dungeon stopped moving. The rabbit, startled, exclaimed, "What's happening? Why did the dungeon stop resetting?" It turned out the dungeon had encountered a bug, and Dayumn was saved. Dayumn was bewildered, unsure of what had just happened. He pondered, why did the dungeon glitch? Was it because of me? And why am I receiving skills and rewards from the dungeon? As Dayumn tried to piece things together, the rabbit looked visibly annoyed. Once more, the rabbit told Dayumn to give up and just die already, but Dayumn didn't care anymore. He turned to the rabbit and asked, "You can't kill me, can you?" Dayumn continued, "If you really wanted me dead, why didn't you kill me like the man in the black suit did at the start of this game?" Hearing this, the rabbit grew increasingly irritated. With a smug grin, Dayumn realized the rabbit truly couldn't harm him. He left, leaving the rabbit fuming in frustration. As Dayumn suspected, the rabbit could only kill players who were still considered alive. Since the dungeon regarded Dayumn as an error or already dead, the rabbit couldn't touch him. Dayumn teased, "Hey, rabbit, won't you join me for some roast meat? If not, I'll just eat it all myself." Suddenly, the cave wall Dayumn had been digging through collapsed, and a massive wave of water gushed in, engulfing him. The rabbit was overjoyed, watching Dayumn struggle against the torrent. The water continued to pour in, flooding the entire cave. Dayumn was swept away by the current, helpless against its force. Dayumn struggled to get up and tried swimming toward the source of the water. He opened his inventory and took out all the soil he had stored to block the leaking water. The rabbit laughed at Dayunn's ridiculous attempt. He plugged a massive water leak with soil the size of an egg. Dayumn dunked all his soil at once, and the rabbit was stunned to see the sheer amount of it. With all his strength, Dayumn hurled the soil toward the water hole.
Ha! Sa!
Unfortunately, the hole was only partially sealed and wouldn't hold for long. Then a notification appeared. Dayumn got a skill upgrade, Dirt Shaper. He decided to try something new, changing the shape of his soil into something other than round. Suddenly, the water channel burst open further, but in the nick of time, Dayumn managed to reshape his soil. He smiled as he held his breath underwater. Using all his might, he molded the soil into bricks. Finally, Dayumn succeeded. He made a wall using the new skill he had. He blocked the cave wall to cover the leaking water. He blamed the rabbit, saying that since its arrival, bad luck had continued to follow him. The rabbit, astonished by Dayunn's determination, began to consider that perhaps Dayumn was too dangerous to let live. Then Dayumn called the rabbit over to show it something. To their surprise, Dayumn had unintentionally created an underground pool. The rabbit warned, "Don't drink it recklessly, it might be poisoned and could kill you." Dayumn ignored the rabbit and used a purification skill he had thought was useless. The rabbit was rendered speechless and visibly annoyed. Dayumn thought, "What if I design the interior of this pool?" With his soil-shaping skills, he transformed the pool into a design resembling an ancient Roman bath. He placed his hand inside a lion head sculpture to create a water fountain. Using his crafting expertise, Dawn designed an extraordinary water channel system for the pool. Suddenly, a notification appeared. Dayumn had earned an achievement for building a pool with a lion head fountain. He was surprised at the seemingly useless accomplishment. But then came good news: fish would now spawn and inhabit the pool he had built. Seeing this, Dayumn was thrilled, realizing he wouldn't have to worry about going hungry anymore. Overwhelmed with joy, he cheered and celebrated his achievement. After the incident, Dayumn invited the rabbit to roast some meat together. Innocently, Dayumn used the iron spikes from a trap he had set up to cook the meat. "Because you're an idiot," the rabbit replied bluntly. "Why didn't I think of this earlier?" Dawn wondered. Feeling a bit foolish, Dayumn didn't care anymore. He just wanted to enjoy his roasted meat in peace. "Thank you, rabbit, to join me for some roasted meat," Dayumn said sincerely. Even though the rabbit remained silent, the rabbit hesitated, looking embarrassed at the thought of accepting Dayunn's offer. "Oh, wait, I forgot you don't eat meat," Dayumn said, scratching his head in confusion. The rabbit grew increasingly annoyed at Dawn's endless naivety. After finishing his meal, Dawn fell into a deep sleep, satisfied with his roasted feast. "Dawn, the most carefree person I've ever met," the rabbit muttered, utterly perplexed. As Dawn slept, he was unaware that monsters were watching him from a distance. Heavy footsteps echoed closer and closer. It was a massive boar, much larger than Dawn himself. Dawn remained asleep, blissfully unaware of the looming danger. Suddenly, he woke up to find the giant boar standing right in front of him. Startled out of his wits, Dawn thought it was a nightmare, but he quickly realized it was all too real. "I'll definitely die if that giant pig touches me," he thought, panicking. In his usual innocent manner, Dawn tried talking to the boar. "Hey, are you hungry?" Terrified and confused, Dawn racked his brain. What should I do? How would Sungwoo handle this? He remembered Sungwoo, who always knew how to deal with tough situations. Sungwoo would totally have a plan for this giant boar, he thought. Finally, Dawn gathered his courage and activated his soil-shaping skill. He built a staircase out of soil and leapt to the top, evading the approaching boar. Part 1 is finished. If you want the next part, comment below, Part 2, and I'll create a recap of this manhwa for you.